I want to start off by being upfront. We don't want to be here tonight. We didn't have to be here. I was born in 1988, the same year as a landmark congressional hearing in which climate scientists presented the public with an inconvenient truth. There was a cost to our greenhouse gas-producing lifestyle, and the first bill would come due within 3 decades. 32 years later, the bill is higher than we thought. Paradise, California paid the ultimate cost in the Camp Fire 2 years ago. We here in Pasadena are beginning to see our portion, with the interest compounding every year of inaction. Longer, hotter summers, dirtier air, and risks to our water supply, from drought to microplastic pollution. Tonight, we're asking our potential city leaders for bold, uncompromising solutions to the uncompromising nature of climate science. Tonight is about facing the climate emergency like we would any other emergency. All hands on deck, facing the facts for what they are, and looking out for the most vulnerable among us. And finally, tonight is about inspiration. Cities have tremendous power at their disposal to combat climate change, from energy to transportation to housing policy. That power, though, comes straight from you, the voters. By your presence here tonight, you're telling these candidates that climate action, in all its difficulty and discomfort, is a top priority for you when you head to the ballot box on March 3rd. So let's get started.
What is your vision for a climate-resilient Pasadena?
We'll start with Mayor Tornick.
Well, thank you for all coming. It's a great turnout. My vision for a resilient and climate-ready Pasadena is one where we can have best practices, have developed consensus around what people think we should be doing and can be doing, and can provide them with reliability as well as cutting-edge technology.
We can go along the line.
Thank you. Well, thank you for having me here. I believe that the city of Pasadena does a lot of things well. We do have a lot of resources, a lot of programs, a lot of incentives that are available to kind of protect our planet and protect our environment. But one thing that I would do as mayor, I would actually bring those resources to the people. See, the seat of mayor is all about creating consensus building, but not just among City Hall, in our community. So those projects and those wonderful programs that we have, incentives that we have, they don't really do a bit of good if we don't know that they're available, if a lot of people don't utilize them. So I would try to do my best as mayor to make sure those resources get to the people and connect with the people on that level. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, the mics don't support the standing up. Yeah.
Well, we can stand
There,
up.
oh, there you go.
It's not
Innovation.
It's not that heavy. My name is Victor Gordo, and I'm proud to stand before you to ask to be your next mayor. First, I'd like to say to all of the hosts today, thank you for being involved. I think a strategy, first of all, involves people, particularly young people who are the future not just of this city, this community, the region and the state and the country and the world. And so I applaud all of you for taking the stand that you've taken today and bringing all of these people together. So my strategy for a climate resilient Pasadena first involves people and reaching people of all ages, informing people of what they can do personally to address climate change. Secondly, I think we need a citywide strategy to do just that, to reach people in their neighborhoods and do a better job of communicating what neighborhoods can do. And then thirdly, I think we need to be a partner in the region and work with our neighbors, because this issue, like many of the complex issues Pasadena faces, is not an issue that Pasadena is going to solve by itself. And so reaching out to our neighbors, working with our neighbors, something that we're not doing enough of, working with the surrounding cities, with the region, and yes, joining the other 484 mayors across this country who have pledged to work together. And I pledge to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, candidates, for your insightful opening statement. Now let's move on to the first few questions. Question 1. Science evidence shows that single-family zoning produces more emissions than multifamily zoning. That is, of course, a sad news, uncomfortable news for Pasadena, which has a strong political identification as a single zoning community. Would you listen to the science in promoting denser multifamily living?
And for this one?
Yeah. How would you listen to the science in promoting denser multifamily housing, which is significantly emits lesser emissions than single-family zoning, which is what Pasadena is known for?
And we'll start with candidate Hardin.
Yes, I actually would listen to the science, and I think that's a problem that not enough of us are actually listening and watching the evidence and responding to it, and I believe that's why we're in a crisis now.
Councilmember Gordo.
So the question really gets to the heart of the debate in Pasadena between high-density development that also is coupled with high-density traffic in our city. And so we need to strike a balance. We need to be smart about growth in the downtown, but I do support protecting single-family residential neighborhoods. Why? Because the single-family residential neighborhoods are one of Pasadena's greatest assets. And so we need to be smart about it. I'm seeing way too much growth creep into what were to be buffer zones protecting the neighborhoods. And let's get back to smart development along the corridors as it was intended. I'm seeing the impact of state law and the impact of mandates that are taking control out of our hands. We were getting it right, and we can't allow the state to continue to impose mandates on the city of Pasadena and Pasadenans that don't allow us to get it right.
Thank you. Mayor Tornick.
Pasadena, I think, is about choice. I don't think that the city should be mandating that everyone live in one type of housing or another. I think that it's certainly true that multifamily housing is a much more efficient land use pattern, and the energy and water consumed in a multifamily unit is far less than single-family units. But Pasadena can do both. We have been doing a good job in terms of encouraging multifamily development, and they are very efficient units. But beyond that, we can be smart with our single-family homes. We have programs that have encouraged people to get rid of their lawns so they're not pouring 60% of their water bill on their front lawn. This isn't southern England, where we have ultimate rain. And we have energy conservation programs. We have solar incentives. We can do a lot of things and have done a lot of things to encourage more efficient use in single-family housing. And our water consumption in the city is less now than it was in 1940 in absolute terms, not on a per capita basis.
Thank you. And as a quick follow-up on the conversation of housing, so Mayor Tornick, thank you for talking about the rebates and the great programs for homeowners. What about renters? So for renters who do want to take advantage of different energy solutions, such as renewables or electric vehicle charging stations, they don't have many options that are widely known. Are there options for renters, and especially for renters who are eco-conscious? Mayor Tornick, you can start.
Well, we do. It doesn't necessarily have to happen at the unit. I mean, we have just opened the largest EV charging station west of the Mississippi in the Marengo Street garage that will serve our renters as well as other people who work in Pasadena. So the programs don't have to be unit-based. It is a challenge. We have encouraged all the developers of new development to include charging stations, for example, and we mandate certain energy conservation practices in all of the units that get built here, and that should translate itself into lower utility bills for the renters.
Candidate Hardin.
Well, as a renter, you don't have a lot of options in regards to taking advantage of a lot of the incentives. So it becomes more of what are you doing personally? And I do believe that there's one incentive you can take advantage of a renter, and that's actually buying the incentive of the rebate for buying an electric vehicle. And to kind of strengthen that incentive, I would like to kind of create free parking, citywide parking for anybody that has an electric vehicle, because that would be a great incentive for a lot of people who want to solve this parking issue as well. So the more people that we can have in Pasadena with electric vehicles and taking advantage of our free parking with electric vehicles, that would greatly reduce our GHG emissions.
The EV station that we recently opened at Marengo is, I think it's 44 stations. That's not nearly enough if we're serious about it. And so encouraging future development, yes, is one thing. But think about electric vehicles. How many people are going to travel within this region in an electric vehicle if we don't have stations throughout the region? How many people are going to really take it seriously when they've got to come back to recharge? And it gets back again to working with our neighbors. It gets back to ensuring that when Pasadena is doing its part, whether it's traffic, whether it's housing, whether it's electric charging stations, that our neighbors are doing the same thing. And we're not doing that right now. We're not working as a region. We're not working with our neighbors to encourage these best practices, not just in Pasadena, but in the region as a whole. And as your mayor, I plan to change that. Thank you.
Question 2, candidates. Currently, the San Gabriel Valley averages 32 days per year where the afternoon temperature exceeds 95 degrees. This is a critical threshold for our vulnerable populations. According to UCLA climate scientists, by 2050, this number could skyrocket to 74 afternoons per year, and by 2100, 117 afternoons per year. Your math is right. That's 5 months out of the year. My question is, if elected, how will you attempt to aid our vulnerable populations, such as the ill, the elderly, the homeless, and the disabled, as these powerful heat waves continue to worsen? Let's start with Mr. Gordo.
I did read your article before this evening, and I was interested in it. And you're absolutely correct. You know, so a lot of people think of it's not just the heat, but it's the extreme weather on both ends. And we often forget that the most impacted are seniors, people who don't have the luxury of turning on the AC, people who don't have an opportunity to get out of the cold. And so, working together, again, getting back to the first leg of the stool, people, getting back together to ensure that people of low income have access to subsidies. I know there's some legislation in Congress that will allow the city to subsidize people, reaching out in neighborhoods to homeless people, to seniors, to ensure that Pasadena is doing its part to mitigate the impacts of severe weather, whether people are homeless or actually living in a home.
Mayor Tornick?
We have a rate structure now that in our electric utility, that's the virtue of having a local power company, that does make certain allowances for low-income people and gives them a break on their utility bill. And beyond that, we have several programs run through the utility that will retrofit homes, existing homes, in terms of providing the kinds of amenities that you're talking about to deal with that problem. I think that that's the sort of tip of the iceberg. We're doing our part, but it's not enough. The kinds of issues that you're talking about, and I'm sure we'll begin to make that distinction as this evolves, are issues that have to be dealt with at a global scale. There are sort of limited solutions at the local level.
Great. Sorry.
Candidate Hardin.
Well, to answer the first part of that question, there's a lot we can do as a city. We have to be aggressive in the approach, though. I do believe that we can use white streets, but there's a climate seal that you could put on the streets to kind of reduce the temperature up to like 10 degrees in the city. So we can apply that, as well as white rooftops. Maybe if we can make an incentive for developers and new developments to require white rooftops on their roofing to also keep their buildings and the city cool. And we also got to protect our urban forests and promote the growth of our urban forests. We do have to be mindful not mindful, but we do have to aggressively monitor and enforce our tree protection ordinance. So when new developers come in and they kind of create a difference in the environment, if they're not going to keep the trees where they are, they have to replace them and move them. And in regard to the second half of the question, as a former senior commissioner for the city of Pasadena, we do have to protect our elderly. We do have to kind of create more cooling centers and designated cooling centers within our city infrastructure and buildings. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you. Let's move on to question 3. So in January, Mayor Tornick said that youth can't understand the difficulties in transitioning to 100% renewable energy because of the cost, saying to me, actually, you don't pay the electricity bills at your house. However, a 2019 study found that 75% of US coal production is more expensive than renewable energy, such as wind and solar. So, should the financial cost of transitioning to 100% renewable energy guide our decision? And how can renters voice their opinions if they would like to switch to renewable energy? We can start with Mayor Tornick.
I don't know, maybe you've started pitching in, but I don't think that the rate structure is the entire story, but I do think that it is a big part of the story. We have a group in here tonight that is very much committed to sort of a fast-forward approach on every aspect of environmental concerns. I appreciate that, and I think that's a growing body of opinion within the city. But I do think that we have to be mindful of what the reality is for people who have difficulty in the city making ends meet. And as we accelerate our attempts to go green and a variety of other things that are sort of really best practices environmentally, I think we do have to be mindful of what the real impact is financially on people on fixed incomes, the very people you were asking about in the last question in terms of don't have the means to necessarily insulate themselves from those problems. So I think, like so many things, we have to understand as elected officials what the impacts are on all of the population.
Thank you. We'll go to Hardin.
Repeat the question one more time.
Should the financial cost of transitioning to 100% renewable energy guide our decision?
Well, no, because first thing is I don't think free energy is going to be more expensive. I just can't see the logic in that. I know that the infrastructure, the change of it and the transition might be expensive, and I think that the city can do something to help subsidize it with government and state grants. But in the long run, I think applying more solar energy, more wind energy, and things like that would actually lower the cost of electricity in the long run. So we do have to just be aggressive in our approach of funding the transition. If we can fund the transition and make that easier for our residents, then in the long run, our electricity will be lower because we do have a new GT5 turbine that can actually convert renewable energy into energy a lot faster than we can maximize it. So I think the way to maximize that is to basically look for state and federal funding for the transition. Thank you.
Let me first say that not only is Ozzy pitching in, but all of the young people in this room are pitching in just by raising our consciousness about this issue. And so I'm proud of all of you for pitching in and helping us all recall the importance of climate change. Cost is a factor. But it's not just about cost. It's also about technology and the change of technology. I mean, a lot of these contracts require long-term commitments on the part of the people of Pasadena. And so we have to be smart about not just the cost as we transition, because it is very much a factor. And if we move too quickly, some will begin to resist it. Some people who maybe don't have the benefit of your wisdom and the wisdom of the people on this panel. So we should keep it in mind, but it shouldn't limit us. It shouldn't limit our aspirational goals. It shouldn't limit our research, and it certainly shouldn't limit us ultimately getting there in a reasonable period of time. But let's also keep in mind how quickly this technology is changing.
Thank you.
So let's now start on a round of yes and no. Another reminder, so no words can be used during the yes or no session. You have a sign in front of you. Make sure to rise it really high up and face the audience with your answer. All right, first question. Is climate crisis your #1 priority?
Yep,
Yes,
yeah.
at the same time. Yes, no answer, please.
If elected, would you support declaring a climate emergency and considering the climate crisis in every decision you and council would make? If elected, would you support declaring a climate emergency and considering the climate crisis in every decision you and council would make?
I'd like to point out that that's an interesting answer since we went to city council last week and they pretty much shot our proposal down.
That's just not fair, because it's one thing to say that, to ask the council for a declaration of a climate crisis, but it wasn't packaged exactly that way. To be fair, these issues, and I appreciate the yes-no thing, I'm willing to play by the rules, but I think in fairness, to begin to grapple with some of these issues, to send us a particular instrument and say, sign this and agree to all of what's attached to it, is not a reasonable thing to do. That's why no one signed it. When you make a commitment and you intend to stand by it, you have to be sure that what you're committing to is something that you really intend to deliver. So it's fine to be glib and say, you know, I support, I declare, but when there are attachments and there's fine print, if you actually take the time to read the fine print, as I have, and read the declarations that were provided, and discover that there are things in the declaration that are contrary to what city policy is and what I think is doable, you have to decline. So to see this in a binary way and say, either you're with us or against us, I appreciate the sense of urgency that you're feeling and that you're trying to convey to us, but I don't think that you can strip it down and make it that simple, and I don't think you're being fair about it.
So since Mayor Tornick had a minute to respond to that, we'll allow the next two candidates, but this will be our one exception for the yes-no.
Well, there was an attack.
Well, I would like to take this time to explain my no for the first answer, and that's because I would declare public safety as my top priority, especially living in the Northwest. Thank you.
You know, I think what I said at the environmental forum to the group is, you know, we need to consider all of the issues that were presented in that document. And there may be some areas where we're willing to sign on and we're able to sign on, but we owe you an explanation on each and every one of those issues. And so I am committed to providing an explanation. I've asked the staff to look at every one of those issues because we ought to have a conversation about it as a community and not just, you know, it is very difficult to say yes or no to something like that without first doing our homework and then providing you with the response that you deserve.
Next question. If elected, would you push for better coverage of the climate crisis in the PUSD K-12 curriculum? And a reminder, this is the yes or no part of the debate. Yes. If elected, would you push for better coverage of the climate crisis in the PUSD K-12 curriculum?
Some cities have enacted their own local Green New Deals. For example, Seattle's plan makes public transportation free. New York's plan requires tens of thousands of buildings to be retrofitted to reduce climate pollution. Should Pasadena enact its own Green New Deal? And to clarify, this doesn't mean completely copying other cities or even the federally proposed Green New Deal. It's about creating one for Pasadena that follows those guidelines. Yeah, it's yes or no. I can repeat the question if you'd like. Should Pasadena enact its own Green New Deal?
In 2011, the city adopted a zero waste strategy plan aimed to divert at least 87% of waste from landfills by 2035. Only 9% of all plastics are recycled in California. Do you support a ban on single-use plastic footwear in the city?
I'm sorry, I need clarification. When you say that, do you mean the city passing its own absent state legislation?
Like an ordinance, like the one that we have already passed, like the styrofoam ban, polystyrene ban.
Next question. In 2009, the city found that 20% of municipal emissions came from buildings and facilities, and 16% of community emissions came from residencies. To decarbonize buildings, a growing number of California cities are requiring that new buildings be fully electric. Would you support a 100% electric requirement for all new construction in the city?
Many cities have a sustainability officer who oversees that operations are done in a green way. Pasadena eliminated a similar position almost a decade ago during the financial crisis. The question is, now that Pasadena's financial situation is more stable, should the city make the hiring of a chief sustainability officer a priority?
Since 1910, groundwater levels in the Pasadena area have dropped from about 125 feet to about 450 feet. The city's Department of Water and Power currently installs laundry-to-lawn gray water systems at no cost to interested customers. Do you support the ordinance or the adoption of a gray water ready building ordinance that would require all new buildings in the city be designed to facilitate the use of gray water and be gray water ready?
A 2003 study found that green roofs with plants and algae that reduces urban heating, absorbs stormwater, increases biodiversity, and improves air quality, reduces the daily energy demand for AC in the summer by over 75%. Do you support the city requiring green roofs on the new construction?
And that concludes our yes/no round. So please give the candidates applause for only one instance, which is a good instance. It was a very good conversation, but we'll continue on with our verbal responses.
Question number 4. Cars are the biggest source of greenhouse gas emissions in California. And if we don't reduce vehicle miles traveled, we won't meet our climate goals. Some cities are making progress cutting back these emissions by designing communities that are more walkable, bikeable, and have more public transit options. Pasadena isn't one of them. Pedestrian deaths and injuries are rising, so people are afraid to walk. Some people who drive don't think a reduction in driving is possible. What actions would you take to give all people access to convenient, affordable, and green mobility options?
We'll start with Councilmember Gordo.
Mobility for all people is important, and we do have a goal of making Pasadena more walkable, more livable, and encouraging people to get out of their cars and use public transit. I think one of the things we should do is think about, as we develop senior affordable housing, for example, or senior housing, think about those transit routes and encourage more development of senior housing around the transit stops, not just trains, but buses, for example, making it convenient for people to walk to stores, making it convenient for people to get out of their cars is the first thing. The second thing is what we're doing currently, we need to do better. People aren't going to get out of their cars if what we're doing now in terms of local transit isn't reliable, if it's not convenient, and that's what I'm hearing. And also, again, working with our neighbors to connect the local transit to the regional traffic, to the regional transit, making it more convenient for people to use.
Mayor Tornick.
I think the data that you cited are somewhat limited. There are portions of Pasadena that score very high on the walkability index. Playhouse District, Old Pasadena, there are a variety of sections of the city that really are very walkable. There are other sections of the city that are strictly suburban and have a very different development pattern. It's a much bigger challenge there in terms of walkability. Pasadena Transit is celebrating its 25th anniversary. This past year, we've increased frequency on the routes. We have reintroduced Sunday service. We are about to start construction on our first truly separated bikeway after years of planning and aggravation. So we are making progress, but I would certainly agree that we can do more. But Pasadena, in many areas of the city, already is becoming quite a walkable city.
As an Of public transportation, there's a lot of things I would do. First thing, I would use Monrovia as a model to incentivize rideshare. They use $1 rideshare prices for Lyft. If you put Go Monrovia as a promo code, I think that would help alleviate traffic in Pasadena, especially during special events. It would get more cars off the road. Second, I would support the assembly bill that would make public transportation free for anybody from kindergarten to high school, especially I would also support Chris Holden's bill trying to make college student transportation free as well. And I'd also advocate for the Metro On The Go program to help seniors get around and help familiarize them with our public transportation. I would help extend Pasadena Transit routes to extend past 7 and 8 o'clock. There's a lot of things that we can do, but we do have to take an aggressive approach, and we do have to just be mindful of the impact it would make if we do kind of make public transportation more affordable and easier for everybody. Thank you.
As a quick follow-up, since we have some time here, with cars being the biggest source of greenhouse gas emissions, road diets are an effective way of encouraging more use of the road with other mobility options. A couple years ago, some of the audience is familiar with the Orange Grove Boulevard failed road diet attempt, and while that may have not been the best and ideal place in terms of what the community wanted around that specific corridor, there does seem to be a sense of dread among city leaders and city staff in trying to go to bat for another type of road diet and probably a better location. We are glad that the protected bike lane is coming online soon, but there's plenty of other locations. Could you just take a minute to respond to kind of this idea of, is the city in a state of paralysis given the effects of the Orange Grove Boulevard fiasco? Mayor Torney?
No, the city is not in a state of paralysis. The Orange Grove, for those of you that are familiar with it, the Orange Grove road diet was a debacle because it wasn't rolled out properly. The city staff attempted to accelerate the process. The neighborhood didn't have a chance to really weigh in and didn't have a fair understanding of what the proposal was really all about. And so I think it failed not because it was conceptually flawed, but because it didn't give the neighbors a chance to buy in and have their fears addressed. The city has a series of road diets all over town. I mean, Los Robles, California, Marengo, there are a whole series of streets that have had lanes limited and reduced. So it's a proven technology, and the city is not paralyzed on that subject. We'll continue to do it where it's appropriate, but we need to give neighbors a chance to buy in and understand what the real virtues are.
Candidate Hardin?
I do actually agree with the mayor. I do believe that it takes public input to make anything successful in our city. And I think the more public input we have, the more information we have to work with to see if a program is going to be viable, because we do not want to make another mistake, kind of like the bike share program, how it just came and went and wasted a lot of city money. It takes a lot of public input. In regards to the actual streets itself, I do promote the different things we can do with the roads. I love the protected bike lanes. I see how they work in downtown LA all the time, and I think we could mirror District 14. I know that's busy compared to what we have, but I think the things that they show, the progress they've shown, and the actual implementation of it could be a lot to learn from. Thank you.
Councilmember?
So I do think that outreach is important, but people, particularly in East Pasadena, resisted it, not just because of the outreach or failure of outreach. They also resisted it because of the type of street that Orange Grove is. And, you know, a lot of people who live in East Pasadena saw themselves going uphill and downhill and resisted it for that reason. Not many of them said, well, I'm going to jump on my bike and travel back and forth. And they also saw the Orange Grove Road Diet as pushing traffic into their neighborhoods. You know, people understand traffic is like water, and it's going to find the path of least resistance. And so people throughout the Orange Grove corridor realized, in many of the single-family residential neighborhoods, realized that if you restrict it along a main thoroughfare like Orange Grove, traffic was going to find a way into their neighborhoods, and that's why it was resisted.
Thank you. We'll move on to question 5. In 2018, the city terminated its coal energy contract with the Intermountain Power Agency in Utah, leaving the current contract to end in 2027. Also in 2018, 33% of the city's power came from coal, compared to 3% statewide. Some candidates have used this contract as a reason why we can't get to 100% renewable energy by 2030. Do you think we should wait until the contract ends to pursue increasing our renewable energy goals? Anybody like to start? Okay.
The city signed a 40-year contract that seemed like a good deal at the time, I suppose, but turned out to be a real millstone around our necks. The coal contract does expire in 2027, but the plant is going to actually shut down in 2025. At this point, we are buying so much renewable energy, so much green energy, that we actually have a surplus of energy that we have to sell back to the marketplace at a loss. So to the extent that we unilaterally declared we weren't going to use that energy that we have to pay for anyway, we really wouldn't be benefiting the people of Pasadena. We would be increasing utility bills, and I'm afraid we're going to have to suffer through the remainder of our contract period. But please know that all the new energy that we've been buying has been wind or solar, and it's been that way for some time.
Hardin?
Well, I'm not the type to say we should breach any contract. I believe there's like liabilities involved and things like that. So I do think we should leave it up to voters. I think we should make all the information available. I think we should have a couple meetings on it, community meetings as well as city council meetings to address that issue. And I do believe that we should exit the contract, but do it in a mindful way. Thank you.
You know, that contract is another example of how quickly things change. When we entered into that contract, it's not because Pasadena didn't want to move to renewables. We wanted to move to renewables, but technology hadn't quite caught up to drive prices down to the point where we are today. And so when going back to the earlier question about the transition period, that's why it's not just a question of money. It's also a question of investing in the correct technology because it's all shifting so quickly. And you know, when we entered into that contract again, the cost of renewables was not anywhere near where it is today. And so, well, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Question number 6. Question number 6. Candidates, do you have children or grandchildren? If so, do you feel any obligation to protect them from the devastating consequences of the climate crisis? Are you willing to look them in the eye 20 years from now and tell them that you did everything in your power to prevent the climate catastrophe? Let's start with candidate Hardin.
To answer the first question, no, I do not have children or grandchildren, but I do have a lot of nieces and nephews, so I definitely would do what I can to protect their future in any way. I would look at them in the eye and say I did everything I can as a candidate, as an uncle, and as a member of this community to reduce our carbon footprint, to protect our environment, and to be involved to the point where I can learn more resources and gather more resources to help others do the same. Thank you.
Gordo?
So I have a 14-year-old son, Michael Manuel, and a daughter who's 12, Emma. And absolutely, you know, I want to be able to look at them in the eye and say that not only did I do everything possible, but I worked with people who were willing to do everything possible themselves. And I think it's a combination of all of us in this room working together that's going to make the difference. And so I plan to look at my kids and hopefully my grandkids one day and said, we did everything together as a community that we possibly could to protect this planet. Thank you.
Yes, I have 3 children. One of them is in the room and is a teacher at Marshall, and 7 grandchildren. We talk about environmental issues all the time, and I can look them in the eye and have to almost every Friday night when they raise these issues. And so I am fully committed, and I have, in spite of the fact that some of my answers may not be satisfactory in this arena tonight, the League of Conservation Voters and the Sierra Club have both endorsed me because of my environmental record.
Okay, so the final question for this round, so that we have some time to transition to the city council portion. Don't worry, I saw a scared face there, Gordo. Actually, Gordo, you earlier spoke about convincing people that making Pasadena greener might be a challenge, especially when it results in financial costs to residents. So what can the city of Pasadena do to turn the climate crisis from a politically polarized issue into a matter of bipartisan concern?
When I say it's a challenge, it's not just a financial challenge. It's a matter of outreach. It's a matter of, sometimes it's language. Sometimes it's how we communicate or don't communicate with people. Your generation, Ozzy, is communicating a lot on cell phones and social media. But there are still, 67% of the people in this city are between the age of 18 to 65. 13% of the people in this city are 65 and older. And every one of those demographics has a different way of communicating. So the challenge is not just a financial challenge. It's about outreaching, effectively communicating, and then working together. The communication part is important because all of you in this room understand the issues involved with climate change, but not everybody has the benefit of your knowledge of the issues, and we need to change that with outreach and effective communication, as well as the financial transition.
I think that you've done us all a service in terms of focusing attention on this issue. I don't think that the format, the yes and no, the 1 minute responses is a very long-term effective way of dealing with it. So I've asked the city manager to pull together on the anniversary, it's the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. So I've asked the staff to pull together a climate action summit where we can talk about this at greater length in a less politically, it'll be after the election, so it'll be a less politically charged environment, and get the staff people from Public Works, from PWP, from Transportation, because it's not just this group, not just the youth that have been raising the issues with regard to climate change, but we have a group of anti-plastic advocates. We have the complete, they may be here tonight, we have the Complete Streets Coalition. So I think we need, what I envision is a summit where we can actually spend an afternoon or a morning talking about this with breakout sessions with somebody from the EAC, the Environmental Environment, and I've talked with the chairman of the EAC. So to have an EAC person, a city staff person, and an elected, if my council colleagues are willing to participate, and really talk this stuff through, not in 1 minute pieces. I hope you'll all come.
And that concludes I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
First of all, I want to commend you guys did an excellent job of preparing this forum. This was a genius idea. Don't be fooled by anybody's responses. In regards to your question, and the answer to me is it's almost the same as anything. Everything's political inside that council room, but it's what do you do when you're not in that council room? What do you do when you go back to your home? What do you do when you go back to your family? So you have to be an advocate. You have to be more than just a councilman, more than just a mayor. When that time's up at the council meeting, when you go home, you're an advocate for everything that you said you believed in that council room, and that doesn't stop. And that's what I do. I actually walk these streets on a daily basis, not just when I'm running, and I engage the community. And I believe that if we take the climate crisis out of the city council room and into the streets, we can get more people aware. But it takes advocacy. Thank you.
Thank you, and that concludes our mayoral forum. Thank you again for our candidates for being here tonight.